It's my hope that you'll stay with me until the end, as the story takes us back to when I was 26 and married Adam, who is now my husband. Adam is someone who is unforgettable. His tall frame, striking appearance, deep blue eyes, neatly styled brown hair, and warm smile leave a lasting impression on everyone he encounters. We first met through a mutual friend, and to be honest, I didn't expect much. I've always thought that love should happen naturally, but I had no idea that this meeting would turn everything around. If you enjoy listening to these sincere and heartfelt stories, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and show your support by liking the video and watching it till the end. I promise it's a story worth hearing. From our very first meeting, Adam left a strong and lasting impact on me. He was not only graceful, but also respectful and considerate. Our conversation felt effortless, as though we had known each other forever. I felt an immediate warmth from him, something I had longed for. After getting to know each other better, we decided to marry. Our wedding was simple, but filled with happiness and love. I vividly remember the day I wore a pure white wedding gown, holding Adam's hand as we walked down the aisle, surrounded by our family and friends. We exchanged our vows in front of everyone, and I truly believed I had found someone who would love me for the rest of my life. Our married life began like a fairy tale. Adam was a dedicated husband, always caring for me and looking out for me. He was the director of a household materials company, a role for which he worked tirelessly. Despite his demanding schedule, he always found time to have dinner with me or chat after a long day. I felt incredibly fortunate because I had not only a wonderful husband, but also a loving home, at least in the beginning. At first, our life together seemed perfect. I felt lucky to have found someone who was caring, successful, and loving. However, as time passed, his job started to consume more of his time. He would leave the house at 6 a.m. and wouldn't return until 9 p.m., or later, if there were urgent meetings or projects. His company wasn't close to our home, so even though he drove a luxury BMW, the commute took nearly an hour each way. He often had to leave for business trips, sometimes for a day or two, leaving me feeling incredibly lonely. I missed him terribly, especially during dinner when I was alone, but I comforted myself by reminding myself that all his hard work was for our future. At first, I convinced myself that he was sacrificing his time for both of our happiness, and despite everything, I still felt content. Despite his busy work life, Adam always made sure to prioritize our time together. We'd have dinner, watch movies, or simply talk about our day, making the most of every moment. Our connection was strong, and I could feel his love in every shared moment. I thought we were the perfect couple, and nothing could come between us. However, as time went on, the pressure of his work continued to build, and Adam started to change. He would come home exhausted, barely having enough energy for a conversation. Dinner often became a quiet, monotonous routine, and instead of spending time with me, he would go to bed early to prepare for the next day. Every morning, he was up and out the door before I even woke up. Gradually, our relationship began to change, and the distance between us grew. Adam became too worn out to meet my emotional needs. There were nights when I tried to engage with him intimately, but he would smile and say he needed to rest. I understood that he was tired, but despite my strong feelings for him, I couldn't help but feel neglected and alone. He was no longer fulfilling my emotional needs, and for a young, vibrant woman like me, the increasing emptiness became difficult to ignore. I kept telling myself it was just a phase and that our love would endure, but deep down, I wasn't so sure anymore. I couldn't ignore the fact that the growing distance was creating a rift in our relationship. At the time, I was still young, full of energy, and driven by intense desires and needs. Adam's long working hours and frequent trips made me feel more and more isolated, caught in a wave of unbearable loneliness. I often found myself trying to soothe my emotions in solitude. On any given day, Adam would leave early for work, leaving me behind to take care of the house. At first, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. But later, after finishing the chores, a sense of restlessness started to stir in my heart, a quiet, lingering ache. Adam had been so preoccupied with work all week that we hadn't spent any time together, and his absence was beginning to weigh on me. I felt the urge to express my feelings, so I went to the bedroom, where I usually felt at peace, to relax and unwind. I'm not sure if I closed the door or just forgot in my rush, but I became so absorbed in my emotions that I lost track of everything around me. The room was silent as I let my feelings take over. That's when I looked up and noticed a figure standing in the doorway. It was my father-in-law, Jackson, staring directly at me. I froze, unable to speak. His gaze was fixed, and I realized that he had been watching me for a while without my noticing. Panic surged through me as I tried to cover my confusion. "Dad, what are you doing here?" I stammered. Jackson, as if snapped out of a trance, quickly muttered, "Oh, I was just passing by," adding nervously, "Don't worry, I didn't see anything." His words only made me more confused. I hadn't asked anything, yet he was already defending himself as if he had something to hide. The silence between us was thick, and the tension was undeniable. Jackson left shortly after, and I stood there, my heart racing. I couldn't stop thinking about him standing there all day, wondering what this meant and what might happen next. I thought that would be the end of it, but it wasn't. That afternoon, as the soft golden light of the sunset filtered through the kitchen window, painting the room in warm hues, I was preparing dinner, just as I always did while Adam was still at work. The house was quiet, save for the sounds of chopping and the smell of cooking food. I was wearing a light white tank top and a knee-length skirt, feeling comfortable in my own space. Suddenly, I felt an odd sensation, as if someone were watching me. I paused, then slowly turned my head. There, in the kitchen doorway, stood Jackson, staring at me with wide, unblinking eyes. I was shocked, but I quickly composed myself. "Dad, what are you looking at?" I asked, trying to sound casual. Jackson seemed startled, as if he were coming out of a daze. His face flushed, and he stammered, "Oh, I was just thinking." Without another word, he turned and left the kitchen, his footsteps unsteady. I stood there feeling uncomfortable and confused. His behavior reminded me of when he first saw me in the room, and I began to realize that this wasn't just my imagination. He often stared at me for longer than usual, and I even caught him smiling to himself when his gaze lingered on me. I tried to convince myself that it was simply a father-in-law's concern for his daughter-in-law, but I couldn't ignore the growing unease that was settling in me as his actions became bolder. Whenever we passed in the narrow hallway, his hand would briefly brush against mine. Even though it lasted only a moment, it startled me. I wasn't sure if these gestures were deliberate, but there was an undeniable discomfort that came with them. I started to feel trapped in my own home. I noticed him watching me from a distance, his eyes filled with something I couldn't quite identify. One morning, as the sunlight poured into the kitchen and we were having breakfast together as a family, the clattering of chopsticks and bowls filled the quiet. As the meal was winding down, Adam looked at the three of us. I was cleaning up when I felt two strong hands wrap around me from behind. I dropped the towel I was holding, my heart racing, before I could react. Jackson whispered in a trembling voice, "Nova, can I hold you for a moment?" I froze, my body stiff with shock. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. A wave of emotions rushed over me. I wanted to pull away, to resist, but my body seemed to betray me. I took a deep breath and managed to say, "Dad, you can't do this. It's wrong." But he didn't let go. He pulled me closer, his breath warm against my ear, his body rigid. "Nova," he whispered, his voice tight. "I know this is wrong, but I can't stop myself. I've kept this inside for too long." Shame, anger, and fear flooded me as I struggled to break free. I tried to push away, but his grip tightened as though he was desperate to confess everything he had been hiding. "I can't forget," he murmured. "I didn't mean to look. I can't stop thinking about you." "I'm sorry, but I can't control myself anymore." My face burned with humiliation and rage. I finally summoned the strength to push harder and break free. Turning to face him, I looked him in the eyes and said firmly, "Dad, this is not right. I cannot accept this, please." Jackson lowered his head, but after a moment he raised it again, his eyes full of resolve. He stepped closer to me, his voice urgent. "Nova, I can't keep this hidden any longer. Since that moment, I haven't been able to erase the pain I feel." I stepped back, gripping the edge of the dining table, my heart pounding with fear and frustration. "Dad, this isn't right. This is our family. You can't think like this," I said, but he didn't stop. He came closer, almost begging. Just once, Nova, and I swear it won't go any further. I couldn't take it anymore. Turning away, I avoided his gaze and said, Dad, please stop. This is a family we can't destroy. Jackson inhaled deeply, his determination unwavering. Nova, I can't forget what I saw. I've tried, but you can't bring me back to life after all these years of loneliness. You don't understand. My anger, my guilt, my helplessness, he said. I turned to him, my voice steady and resolute. Dad, I can't. I won't do this. This is my family. Please stop before it's too late. My words hit him like a physical blow, his eyes filled with pain and regret. After a long silence, he lowered his gaze. His voice, hoarse and broken, barely escaped his lips. Nova, I'm sorry. I don't deserve to be your father-in-law. I don't know why I acted this way. I couldn't control myself. I stood still, my heart racing, but I found the strength to speak calmly. This has to end now. This is our family, and I will never cross that line. Jackson remained silent, simply nodding as though accepting my words. He stepped back, his face marked with regret and exhaustion. Without another word, he turned and left the room, his footsteps echoing heavily in the hall. I stood there, shaken, finally exhaling a breath of relief. But deep down, I knew the peace in our home had been shattered, and I couldn't forget what had happened. From that point on, Jackson, my father-in-law, seemed to disappear from our daily lives. He rarely left his room, as if severed from the world around him. When he did show up, it was only for fleeting moments, silently passing by me, avoiding eye contact. The air in the house grew thick with tension, and his silence constantly reminded me of what had transpired. Adam, unaware of the truth, thought his father was simply going through a phase of sadness or loneliness as he aged. One evening during dinner, Adam commented, I've noticed Dad's not as lively anymore. He doesn't go outside as often, and he's lost interest in the things he once loved. Maybe I should talk to him, but I don't know where to start. I nodded, keeping my voice calm. I think Dad just needs some time to himself, I replied softly, trying to keep my own anxiety in check. The reality was, I alone knew the reason for Jackson's withdrawal, and the guilt I felt weighed on me every single day. I often wondered if things would ever go back to how they were. I wished I could forget it all and go back to the past, but the look in Jackson's eyes when our paths crossed still haunted me. It wasn't filled with anger or resentment, but with a deep, lingering sadness, as if he were trapped in his own unbearable guilt. I didn't know what to do. Should I ignore everything and pretend it never happened? Or should I confront it and try to find a way to fix things? No matter the choice, I could feel the distance growing between us, and the peace in our family slowly slipping away. Time passed, but I knew in my heart that these wounds would never fully heal. From this experience, I learned the most important lesson of my life. Never cross a moral boundary, no matter the circumstances. In moments of emotional turmoil or weakness, we may be tempted to act impulsively, but the consequences can be severe and irreversible. It's vital to maintain ethical boundaries and protect what truly matters, our family. Ignoring or avoiding problems won't make them disappear. In fact, it often makes them worse. The key to protecting ourselves and our loved ones and to remaining resilient is standing firm in our values and respecting ourselves. One of the most valuable lessons I've learned is the importance of open, honest communication, especially within families. We should never shy away from sharing our thoughts and feelings with those closest to us, particularly our partners. Keeping everything inside can lead to misunderstandings and unnecessary conflict. Thank you for listening to my story. If this message resonated with you, please consider supporting me by liking this video and subscribing to the channel. Your support means a lot to me, and I look forward to sharing more stories with you in the future.